Jackson Miller was 19 when he first smelled Vietnam. It was the stench of jet fuel, sweat, and something wet and rotten floating up from the jungle. The air around Da Nang stuck to his skin as soon as he stepped off the C-130. Back home in Ohio, autumn had probably just started, cold wind coming off the river. Here it was like walking into a fever. He clutched his duffel bag so tight his knuckles turned white. Around him, other guys from his unit were trying to play it cool, cracking jokes, whistling, pretending this was just another training exercise. The older ones, the ones with faded uniforms and thousand-yard stares, just watched them silently, smoking in the shade. "Private Miller," the sergeant barked, "quit sightseeing. You're not here on vacation." "Yes, Sergeant," Jackson muttered, dragging his boots through the red dust. He had been trained for this. Fort Benning, Georgia. Hot, humid, crawling with sand and drills that never seemed to end. He had fired the M16 until the recoil felt like a handshake. He had learned to clean mud out of places he didn't know existed. He had heard all the lectures about communists, dominoes, and duty, but none of that training prepared him for the sound. Not the artillery in the distance, not the helicopters whipping overhead, not even the crack of rifles beyond the tree line. It was something else, a low, almost inaudible hum beneath everything, like the jungle itself was whispering in a language he didn't understand. He figured it was just nerves, jet lag, fear. He had no idea that years later, he would hear that same sound in the quiet hallway of a veterans' hospital on the other side of the world. They shipped him to a forward fire base near the Central Highlands. The name didn't matter. Names changed, coordinates changed, but the jungle stayed the same. Their call sign was Echo 25, 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company. They slept in sandbagged hooches, ate lukewarm rations, and joked about how short they were, even when they'd only been in country for a week. Jackson's squad became his world. There was Rodriguez from Texas, who carried a rosary and sang old rock roll songs under his breath when things got tense. Kowalski, a big kid from Chicago, always chewing gum, always making someone laugh. Henderson Quiet from Alabama, who wrote letters every night to a girl named Marie. And Sergeant Hawkins, their squad leader, who had been in country longer than any of them, with scars along his forearm and eyes that checked every shadow. The first weeks were mostly patrols, walking single file along narrow trails, seeing green in every direction. Sometimes they'd pass villagers carrying baskets or leading water buffalo. Sometimes they'd find nothing but old shell casings and rusting metal. The enemy was there somewhere, but the jungle swallowed everything. At night, the world shrank to the flicker of cigarettes, the hum of insects, and the occasional pop of distant gunfire. Jackson slept badly from the start. Dreams came fast and heavy, boots stuck in mud, shapes moving between the trees, faces he didn't recognize staring at him from the darkness. He'd wake up with his heart pounding and no memory of why he was so scared. "Relax, Miller," Rodriguez would whisper, rolling over in his bunk. "It's just Nam saying hello." Yeah, Jackson would think just Nam. But sometimes, late at night, when everyone else snored and the generator hummed, he swore he could hear something else beneath the insects and the distant artillery. A murmur, a hiss, like someone whispering right behind his ear. He was too scared to turn around and check. The mission that changed everything came in late September 1969. They'd been at the fire base for almost 2 months when the captain called Echo 25 into the briefing bunker. The air inside was thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of wet canvas. On the table in front of Captain Reynolds lay a map, its edges curled, its surface crisscrossed with pencil lines and grease pencil marks. "Listen up," Reynolds said, his voice flat. "We've been getting strange transmissions on the radio." "Strange how, sir?" Hawkins asked. The captain hesitated just for a second, enough for Jackson to notice. "Old call signs," Reynolds said at last. "Units that aren't active anymore, dead channels." The room seemed to get smaller. Couple nights back, HQ picked up a distress call from a unit out near Hill 47, About 15 clicks from here. Reynolds tapped a spot on the map. They used the call sign Zulu 13. Henderson frowned. Zulu 13 never heard of M. You wouldn't have, Reynolds replied. They went missing in 65, whole platoon, no bodies recovered. The area got marked as hostile and then forgotten about. Until now. The squad looked at each other uneasily. Could be NVA playing games on the radio, Kowalski said, though there wasn't much certainty in his voice. Maybe, Reynolds said, maybe not. Either way, Division wants eyes on that area. See if there's a new enemy position, a relay station, something. Hawkins, your boys are going out tonight. Recon only. You see something weird, you report. No heroics. Yes, sir, said Hawkins. Reynolds paused again, looking at each of them in turn. One more thing, those transmissions, the distress call, it wasn't just static and a name, it was a voice. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. It was in English, male, sounded American, and he said the date. Yeah, Rodriguez asked, so. Reynolds' fingers tightened on the edge of the table. He said it was September 18th, 1965. The room went quiet. But sir, Jackson said slowly, that was 4 years ago. I know, Miller. Reynolds exhaled, exhausted. That's the problem. They moved out at dusk. The jungle changed at night. During the day it was oppressive and alive, full of buzzing, chirping, rustling. At night it felt like a black ocean. The trees turned into dark pillars. The sky a narrow strip of bruised purple above. Jackson's pack weighed heavier than usual. They walked in a staggered column, the only light the faint glow of Kowalski's cigarette, which Hawkins quickly ordered him to put out. Last thing we need is to be a walking target, Private, Hawkins growled. Yes, Sarge, Kowalski muttered, grinding the cigarette under his boot. Rodriguez whispered the time every half hour, checking his watch with a little red-lensed flashlight. Henderson walked just ahead of Jackson, the radio antenna jutting up from his back like a thin metal vine. Jackson's hands were slick on his rifle. The further they got from the fire base, the more that low hum Jackson had always heard seemed to grow. It wasn't real, he told himself. Just his heartbeat, his breath, the jungle. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting. About 5 clicks in, the terrain started to slope upward. The trees thinned slightly, replaced by tall elephant grass that brushed against their legs. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the only sounds were their own boots and the distant croak of frogs. Hold up, Hawkins signaled, raising his fist. They froze. Listen, he whispered. Far away, almost too far to be sure, Jackson heard it, a crackling, like someone tuning through radio stations. Henderson fiddled with the PRC-25 on his back, turning the dial slowly. A burst of static filled the night. Then for a second a voice emerged, thin and crackling. Zulu 13, this is under fire, repeat under fire, we're pinned. The voice cut out. Henderson blinked. You hear that? He whispered. Try again, Hawkins said. Henderson turned the knob, headphones pressed to his ears. The rest of the squad stood in the dark, the hairs on the backs of their necks standing up. The radio hissed, crackled, then fell silent. Nothing, Henderson said finally, like it never happened. That probably bounced from God knows where, Kowalski muttered. I mean, radio waves can travel, right. No one answered him. They kept moving. It took them hours to reach the area marked as Hill 47. The hill itself was more of a raised ridge covered in low vegetation and scattered trees. Through the foliage, Jackson could see the faint outlines of old sandbags, rotting planks and rusting barrels. This used to be a fire base, Hawkins whispered. Long time ago. Looks abandoned, Rodriguez said. Stay sharp. Just because it looks empty doesn't mean. He was cut off by a whisper, crackling from Henderson's radio. Echo 25. This is Zulu 13, anyone copy. The voice was clearer this time, a little distorted but undeniably human. Henderson's eyes went wide. He hit the transmit key. This is Echo 25, he said, his voice shaking despite his best effort. Zulu 13, we read you. What's your location, over? Static, then. Coordinates 2834, enemy everywhere, need evac. The rest of the squad crowded around Henderson, as if proximity might make the signal stronger. Zulu 1-3, Hawkins said, grabbing the handset. Identify. What's your commander's name, soldier? For a moment, nothing. Then, Captain Reynolds. Hawkins went pale. Kowalski shook his head. No way, our captain is Reynolds. That's some sick. Henderson cut him off. Signal didn't sound like a joke. Zulu 1-3, Hawkins said slowly into the handset. What is today's date? Another long pause. The jungle around them seemed to hold its breath. September 18th, 1965. The voice sounded almost relieved to say it, like a man confirming something he'd been repeating for days. Jackson's throat went dry. He looked up at the sky, at the clouds drifting across the stars. It was September 1969, 4 years gone. Yet the tremor in the voice on the radio, the panic, it sounded like it was happening right now. Something's wrong with this, Rodriguez whispered. Really wrong. Hawkins seemed to wrestle with himself for a moment, then straightened up. Coordinates match the center of this hill, he said quietly. Right where we are. Maybe it's a recorded loop, Kowalski said. Like a trap. Old transmission being rebroadcast by Charlie to mess with us. Maybe, Hawkins replied, but he didn't sound convinced. They moved carefully up the ridge, weaving between the ghostly remains of the old fire base. Sandbags had split open and spilled their sandy guts. Wooden planks were black with rot. A rusted 55-gallon drum lay on its side, half buried in dirt. Then they saw the bunkers. They were dug into the hillside, their openings framed with cracked logs and sandbags that had turned to stone over time. The nearest bunker's entrance yawned open, a black rectangle in the earth, breathing cold air. From inside, Jackson swore he heard something. Not movement, not breathing, whispering. Check it, Hawkins ordered. Rodriguez, Miller with me. Everyone else perimeter. Jackson's legs felt heavy as he followed the sergeant to the bunker's mouth. The air flowing from inside was cooler, carrying a faint smell. Damp earth, mold, and something metallic, faint but sharp. Blood, his mind suggested. Rotting blood. He squeezed his eyes shut, shook it off. No, that was just his imagination. Old bunkers smelled like a lot of things. Rodriguez clicked on his flashlight, shielding the beam with his hand so it wouldn't be seen from a distance. The light cut a thin tunnel into the darkness. On me, Hawkins whispered. They stepped inside. The temperature dropped almost instantly. Sweat cooled on Jackson's skin, making him shiver. The beam of Rodriguez's flashlight jumped over rotted wood supports, dirt walls, old ammunition crates covered in cobwebs. The bunker wasn't big. Just a narrow room, maybe 10 feet deep, with a low ceiling that forced them to hunch. The air was thick, pushing against their lungs. See anything? Hawkins asked quietly. Just junk, Rodriguez whispered, moving the light slowly. His beam passed over something in the corner and flicked back, steadying. What is that? Jackson breathed. In the far corner of the bunker, half buried in dirt, lay an old radio set. Not the newer PRC-25 like Henderson carried, but a bulkier, older model, the kind Jackson vaguely remembered from training manuals. Its metal casing was corroded, its dials frozen with rust. And yet, as the light touched it, Jackson heard the faint, unmistakable sound of static. Zulu 1-3 to Echo 2-5, the radio whispered, though no lights glowed on its surface. Do you read? Jackson's heart hammered. The radio upstairs just got that transmission, he said. How can this one? He stopped. On top of the dead radio, half covered in dust, lay a set of dog tags. Rodriguez reached out slowly, brushing the dirt away. The metal gleamed faintly in the flashlight's beam. Name, Rodriguez muttered, reading. Miller, Jackson L. For a second, Jackson thought he had misheard. What? He whispered. Rodriguez swallowed, turning the tags toward him. Jackson stared at the letters. They were his. Miller, Jackson L. His date of birth. His blood type. Right there, stamped on old, tarnished metal that had clearly been here long enough to rust. That's not possible, he said. The words came out strangled. Those are mine. He reached under his shirt, feeling for the familiar weight on his chest. His fingers slid over smooth metal. His tags were still there. "You're messing with me," he whispered. "You planted those, Rodriguez. You had them made, or—" Rodriguez shook his head vigorously. Even in the dim light, Jackson could see the fear in his eyes. "I swear, man, I just saw them now." Hawkins took the old tags from the radio, his face unreadable. "Could be another Miller," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Pretty common name." Jackson nodded numbly, but his heart wasn't buying it. The date of birth, the blood type. It was all him. He felt like the floor was tilting sideways. The bunker suddenly felt much smaller. The radio crackled again. This time the voice sounded closer, like the speaker was in the room with them. "Echo 2-5, it whispered. "We see you." Hawkins stiffened. "Move now, we're done here." They backed out of the bunker quickly, the air warming as they stepped into the night. Back outside, the rest of the squad looked tense. "Sir," Henderson said as they emerged, "we got another transmission while you were inside." Hawkins' jaw clenched. What'd it say? Henderson hesitated. He asked if we'd found the bunker. Rodriguez cursed under his breath. "Any chance someone's just having a sick laugh with us?" Kowalski asked. "Some joker sitting behind a desk at HQ. HQ doesn't know about half this stuff," Hawkins growled. "And they sure as hell wouldn't lurk near an abandoned fire base in the middle of nowhere, just to spook a recon squad." The jungle rustled around them, the leaves shifting silently in a wind Jackson couldn't feel. "Sergeant," Jackson said quietly, Can I see those tags again?" Hawkins handed them over. They were cold and heavier than they looked. Miller Jackson L.O. Pose. Catholic, U.S. Army. His tongue felt thick. His vision blurred around the edges. In the distance, thunder rumbled softly. Or maybe it was artillery. In Vietnam, it was sometimes hard to tell. "We log what we've seen," Hawkins said, forcing his voice into a tone of command. "We head back before dawn. Whatever this is, it's above our pay grade." "Wait," Henderson said, raising a hand. Radio again. The PRC-25 crackled, louder this time. "Echo 2-5, this is Zulu 1-3. We see you at Hill 47. You're not supposed to be here." The voice sounded different now, closer, clearer, almost annoyed. Henderson swallowed. "Who is this?" he demanded into the microphone. "Identify yourself. Rank and name, soldier." There was a pause. Then very softly the voice said, "Private Jackson Miller." Every head turned slowly toward Jackson. His entire body went cold. That's not funny," he whispered. Henderson pulled the headset away from his ears as if it had burned him. "I didn't touch the dials, I swear." "Cut the radio," Hawkins ordered sharply. "Now." Henderson flipped the power switch, and the radio died with a soft click. The sudden silence was worse than the static. "Form up," Hawkins snapped. "We're leaving." They started back down the hillside in a tight formation. The jungle seemed thicker than before, the shadows deeper. Every snapping twig sounded like a gunshot. "Hey, Sarge," Kowalski murmured. "You ever hear of a place being cursed?" "Shut up, Kowalski," Hawkins replied. Eyes open, no chatter. But Jackson could tell the sergeant wasn't as calm as he sounded. His steps were too quick, his head turning too often toward sounds that might have been nothing. They walked for 30 minutes, then an hour. The jungle didn't change. "Shouldn't we be closer to the fire base by now?" Rodriguez asked quietly. "Feels like we've been walking forever." Henderson checked his map by the dim glow of his flashlight. "According to this, we should be halfway back," he said. But what?" Hawkins demanded. "The landmarks, the creek we crossed on the way here, the bend in the trail with the burned tree. We haven't passed any of it." "Maybe we took a wrong turn," Kowalski said. "No," Henderson replied, his voice tight. "We followed the same bearing." Sarge watched the compass. "I double-checked. We should have hit the creek 15 minutes ago." They stopped. The jungle around them buzzed with insects, but somehow, beneath it all, Jackson heard that low hum again. Louder now. Like a generator deep underground getting closer. He looked up, expecting to see stars. There were none. The sky above was a smooth black sheet. No clouds, no moon, no stars, just darkness. His stomach lurched. "Sarge," he whispered, "the sky, it looks wrong." Hawkins glanced up, frowned. "Probably cloud cover, focus on the trail." Cloud cover or not, Jackson thought there should have been something. A hint of gray, a breeze, a change in the scent of the air. Instead, it felt like they were walking under a lid that was gradually closing. The first figure appeared just off the trail, standing between the trees. Jackson saw it out of the corner of his eye, a shape, pale against the dark foliage. He turned his head quickly, raising his rifle. "Contact," Hawkins hissed. Jackson's voice stuck. "I saw something over there." The squad dropped into a crouch, rifles aimed. Jackson stared into the trees, trying to find the spot again. For a moment there was nothing but leaves and branches. Then he saw it. A man standing stiffly between two tree trunks. His uniform was old, faded, clinging to his thin frame. His helmet sat crooked on his head. His face was pale, eyes sunken, skin stretched too tight over his bones. He looked American. "Hey," Jackson whispered, heart pounding. "You see that? Rodriguez, you see him." Rodriguez followed his gaze, squinting. "I don't see anyone, hermano." The man's lips moved. Jackson couldn't hear the words, but he saw the shape of them. "You're not supposed to be here." He didn't blink, he didn't breathe, he just stared. Jackson rubbed his eyes, looked again. The man was gone. He swallowed hard. "Forget it," he said. "Must have been my imagination." They kept moving, slower now. A few minutes later, Kowalski flinched, swinging his rifle toward the trees on the other side. "You see that?" he hissed. "There was someone right there, swear to God." "Quit jumping at shadows," Hawkins snapped. But his own knuckles were white around his weapon. As they trudged on, more shapes appeared. A figure leaning on a tree, another crouching by an invisible foxhole, a man dragging himself along the ground, leaving no marks in the soil. They always stood just far enough away that Jackson couldn't quite see their faces clearly. None of them made a sound. Sometimes Jackson heard footsteps behind him, but when he turned, there was nothing. At one point, he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck, like someone whispering. A wordless murmur that slid into his ears and curled around his brain. He resisted the urge to sprint. "Sergeant," Henderson said quietly at last, "I think we're lost." Hawkins stopped. "Map," he ordered. They gathered around as Henderson unfolded it again, his hands shaking slightly. He traced their path with his finger. "We moved south-southeast from the fire base to reach Hill 47. We're returning on the same bearing, just reversed. We can't be this far and not hit the creek. It's not possible." "Try the radio again," Hawkins said. "Maybe HQ can guide us in." Henderson hesitated. "I thought you said." "I know what I said," Hawkins replied. "But we need GPS, hell, anything." They powered up the PRC-25. It crackled alive, louder than before, filling the quiet with angry static. "This is Echo 25 to Firebase Charlie," Hawkins said into the handset. "Do you copy? Over." "Static, Firebase Charlie, this is Echo 25. Requesting bearings and guidance. Anyone copy? Over." For a moment nothing, then softly, Echo 25. Jackson's blood went cold. The voice was his, not similar, not close, his. It sounded like a recording from a place he'd never been, saying words he'd never said. "Echo 25, the radio Jackson continued. "This is Zulu 13. You're not supposed to be here. You never left." Henderson ripped off the headset, breathing hard. "That's enough," Hawkins snapped. "Radio off now. Nobody touches it until I say so." Henderson's fingers fumbled, finally flipping the switch again. The radio fell silent. "Form up," Hawkins said. "We change course, new bearing." "That way." He pointed off to the right. "How do you know that's the way?" Kowalski asked. "I don't," Hawkins admitted. "But staying on the same path is getting us nowhere. We keep moving, we keep trying, He froze, they all did. Because ahead of them, barely visible between the trees, was a shape they recognized. A sandbag wall, a rusted drum, a broken antenna, Hill 47. They had walked in a circle. For a moment, nobody spoke. The jungle pressed in, buzzing. That's impossible, Rodriguez whispered. How did we end up back here? We must have looped around, Kowalski said. Trail curved more than we thought. Curved? Henderson snapped, his voice cracking with panic. A full circle around a hill without noticing. We're not idiots. Jackson stared at the familiar outline of the abandoned bunker entrance. It looked darker now, like a mouth waiting to swallow them again. His fingers tightened around the old dog tag still in his pocket. He could feel the letters pressed into the metal, pressed into his skin. Miller, Jackson L. Maybe, Jackson began, struggling to find words. Maybe we should wait until dawn. Set up a perimeter. Try to get bearings when there's light. Hawkins hesitated. Night in the jungle was deadly, but so was wandering blind in circles. Fine, he said at last. We dig in. No one goes near that bunker. Henderson, you and I will try the radio every half hour. Everyone else, two-man watches. They set up a rough perimeter around the hill, using what remained of the old fortifications. The ground was uneven, littered with rusted metal and fragments of broken crates. The air felt thick, too heavy for the altitude. Jackson drew first watch with Rodriguez. They sat side by side behind a crumbling sandbag wall, rifles pointed toward the tree line. The darkness beyond looked solid, like it could be touched. You okay, man? Rodriguez whispered. No, Jackson replied honestly. You? What? Not even close. They were quiet for a moment. Back home, Rodriguez said softly, my abuela, my grandmother, used to talk about places that were stuck. You know, not haunted exactly, but trapped between times. Like an old house where something bad happened. She said sometimes the air gets thick with memories and can't move on. Keeps replaying the same moment. Jackson swallowed. You think that's what this place is? What? I don't know what this place is, Rodriguez replied. But I know it doesn't want us here. The insects buzzed louder. A frog croaked somewhere nearby, then abruptly fell silent as if someone had shut it off. Jackson's eyes were heavy, but he forced them to stay open. His mind wandered to the dog tags, to the voice on the radio, to the pale faces in the trees. He must have drifted off for a second because when he blinked, the jungle looked different. The shadows were sharper, the air colder. The sky above, glimpsed through gaps in the canopy, was no longer blank black but a dull, bruised gray. Rodriguez, he whispered, nudging his friend. You see that? Rodriguez didn't answer. Jackson turned his head. Rodriguez was gone. His rifle lay on the ground where he had been sitting. The impressions of his boots were still in the dirt as if he had gotten up moments before. Rodriguez, Jackson hissed, his throat tight. Quit screwing around, this isn't funny. He heard a whisper, not words, just the sound of someone breathing close to his ear. He spun around, no one. Sergeant, he called, louder now. Sarge, Rodriguez is gone. No answer. He stood up, heart pounding, and realized he couldn't see any of the others. The sandbagged ring that had seemed full of life just moments before now felt empty, abandoned. No Henderson fiddling with the radio. No Kowalski complaining about the rations. No Hawkins muttering to himself. Hello, Jackson's voice cracked. Anyone. Silence. The air felt thicker, pressing against his skin. The hum he'd always heard was now a dull roar under his ribs. He began to walk along the perimeter, calling out names. His boots crunched on dirt and debris. He reached the place where Henderson had been set up with the radio. The radio was there alone, its cord coiled like a dead snake. The headset lay in the dirt, but there was no Henderson, no footprints leading away, no sign of struggle, just emptiness. Jackson's breathing turned ragged. He clutched his rifle so hard his fingers ached. This isn't real, he whispered. It's some kind of nightmare. I fell asleep on watch, that's all. I'll wake up and Hawkins will chew me out in. The radio crackled. He froze. Slowly, as if pulled by invisible strings, Jackson bent and lifted the headset. He didn't power the unit on. The switch was still set to off, yet the static grew louder in his ears. Echo 2-5, the familiar voice whispered. You left us. He swallowed. Who are you? He whispered back. You left us at Hill 47, the voice continued, ignoring his question. The enemy closed in. No evac, no artillery, just silence. We called and called. No one came. Images flashed across Jackson's mind. Men screaming, bunkers collapsing, smoke choking the air. Faces he didn't recognize, twisted in fear. "We died here," the voice said, and the hill remembered. Jackson squeezed his eyes shut. "I wasn't here. I wasn't even in the army in '65. Time doesn't matter here," the voice replied. "Only the memory. The hill doesn't care who you are, it just plays the tape again and again." He felt something cold touch his shoulder. He opened his eyes. Standing in front of him was a man in a faded uniform, helmet sitting crooked, face hollow. One of the figures from the trees. Up close, Jackson could see the grime embedded in the man's skin, the torn fabric of his sleeve, the dark stain spreading across his chest. His eyes were cloudy, but they focused on Jackson with terrible clarity. On his chest hung a set of dog tags. Miller Jackson L. Jackson staggered back, dropping the headset. "No," he whispered. That's not me." The man tilted his head. "Does it matter?" he asked. His voice was the same as the one on the radio, the same as Jackson's own, but stretched, distorted, echoing. "You came," the man said. "You answered the call, just like before, just like always." "I don't understand," Jackson stammered. "Where is my squad? Where are my men?" The man's mouth curled into something that might have been a smile. "They're where you left them," he said. "Like last time, like every time." The jungle around them flickered. For a second, Jackson was no longer standing in the decaying ruins of an old fire base. He was in the middle of a fierce firefight. Bullets snapped overhead. Explosions shook the ground. Men screamed orders and prayers. Smoke burned his lungs. The sky was red with tracers. He saw Rodriguez firing desperately over a sandbag wall. Henderson shouting into a radio that spat only static. Kowalski clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers. Hawkins dragging a wounded soldier toward a bunker entrance. And above it all, the distant whine of rotors that never came closer. Then the vision snapped back. He was alone again, standing in the quiet, rotting remains of Hill 47. The man in front of him hadn't moved. "You left us," the man said again. "Or maybe we left you. The hill doesn't care, it just remembers what it wants." Jackson shook his head, tears burning his eyes. "I didn't leave anyone," he choked out. I never ran." The man reached out, closing his cold fingers around Jackson's wrist. "Not yet," he said softly. "But you will, or you did, or you already have. It's all the same here." The world tilted. For a moment, Jackson saw himself through other eyes, running down a slope, ears ringing, ignoring the cries behind him. His own dog tags bouncing on his chest, his mouth open in a wordless scream. He saw flashes of later, sitting in a hospital bed, staring at his reflection in a window, lying awake in Ohio, listening for helicopters that never came, standing in front of a mirror, telling himself it wasn't his fault. The hum in his chest grew louder, drowning out his thoughts. "Stop it," Jackson whispered. "Please stop." The man's grip tightened. "You came back," he said. "So now the tape can play again. Maybe this time you'll stay." A gunshot rang out. The man flickered, his image trembling like a reflection on water. He released Jackson's wrist and stepped back. Jackson spun around. Hawkins stood a few feet away, rifle raised, eyes wide and wild. "Who were you talking to, Miller?" he demanded. Jackson looked back. The pale man was gone. Only empty air and drifting mist remained. Jackson faltered. "Didn't you see him?" Hawkins' jaw clenched. "All I saw was you standing there talking to yourself. Where the hell is everyone else?" "You do know," Jackson whispered. Hawkins shook his head. "I woke up alone, thought you ditched post, found you here babbling into a dead radio." Jackson looked down. The headset lay in the dirt, its cable unplugged. His hands were empty. The old dog tags were gone. Only his own tags lay cold against his chest. "Sergeant," he said slowly, "I think this hill is wrong. I think it stuck in that day in '65 when Zulu 13 died. And somehow we got pulled into it." Hawkins stared at him for a long time. In Nam, the sergeant said finally. I've seen villages that weren't there the next day, trails that led to different places depending on who walked them. I've seen men shot and standing and men untouched but gone. I don't put anything past this place. So what do we do? Jackson asked. Hawkins glanced at the dead radio, then at the edge of the hill. We walk, he said. We walk and we don't listen. Not to the radio, not to voices that sound like ours, not to memories. We just keep moving until something changes. And the others, Jackson whispered. Rodriguez, Henderson, Kowalski. Hawkins' face twisted. If the hill wants them, it already has them. You want to stay and ask it to spit them back out. Jackson's chest ached. On another hill in another time, maybe he had stayed. Maybe he had made a different choice. Maybe that's why those old dog tags with his name were there at all. Or maybe the hill just liked playing games. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. We walk. They left Hill 47 again, side by side, rifles raised. The jungle watched. They walked in silence for what felt like hours. The sky gradually lightened from bruised gray to pale blue, then to the washed-out glare of morning. The insects' buzzing changed pitch. Birds began to call again. At some point, the air shifted. It was subtle at first, a hint of different soil underfoot, a change in the way sound bounced between the trees. Then Jackson smelled smoke, cooking oil, human presence. Ahead through the branches, he saw the outline of sandbags, metal barrels, and the familiar shape of tents. Firebase Charlie. They had made it back, just like that. They were spotted by the perimeter guard before they were halfway across the clearing. A corporal shouted a challenge, then relaxed as he recognized Hawkins' silhouette. Jesus, the corporal muttered as they stumbled inside. We thought you guys were hit. You're the only two back. Hawkins' jaw clenched. Guess so. The captain stormed out of the command tent, face flushed. Where the hell have you been? Reynolds demanded. You were due back hours ago. And where's the rest of your squad? Hawkins stared at him. How long were we gone, sir? He asked quietly. Reynolds blinked. 6 hours, maybe 7. You left just after 2100. It's 400 now. Jackson and Hawkins exchanged a look. It felt like days. What happened out there? Reynolds asked, softer now. Did you encounter enemy forces? Hawkins hesitated. Jackson thought of explaining everything. The voices, the dog tags, the missing men, the way the sky shut like a lid. He imagined the looks they would get, the notes in their files. Shell shock, combat stress, unfit for duty. He thought of Hill 47, quietly humming to itself out in the jungle, replaying old moments. No, sir, Hawkins said finally. No enemy contact. The others got separated in the dark. Radio malfunction. Couldn't raise anyone. We did a wide sweep and then returned here. Reynolds frowned. So where are they? Hawkins swallowed. I don't know, sir. The captain cursed under his breath and turned away, shouting for a search party to be organized once the sun was higher. For now, he ordered Hawkins and Jackson to medical for evaluation. As they walked toward the aid tent, Jackson felt something in his pocket. He reached in. His fingers brushed cold metal. He pulled out a set of dog tags he didn't recognize. The name stamped on them was Rodriguez, Miguela. He stopped walking. Hawkins turned. You okay, Miller? Jackson stared at the tags, then closed his fist around them until they dug into his palm. I'm fine, he lied, just tired. Years later, in a quiet room at a VA hospital back in the States, Jackson would tell this story to a young psychiatrist who scribbled notes on a clipboard. He would talk about the heat, the smell, the radio, the bunker. He would talk about the voices. He would talk about how 3 men from Echo 25 were officially listed as MIA, last seen near an unidentified hill in the Central Highlands. How no search party ever found their bodies. How Harris, now retired, older, refused to talk about that night. He would talk about the dog tags he kept in a small box at home. His own, Rodriguez S. The old, rusted ones with his name and a date that didn't make sense. Sometimes, late at night, he would wake up to the sound of static, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere in the house. He would get up, heart pounding, walk from room to room and find nothing. But if he listened closely, too closely, he could almost make out a voice in the noise. Echo 2-5, it would whisper. This is Zulu 1-3, we see you. In those moments he thought of Hill 47. He imagined it still out there in the jungle, long after the war was over. The bunkers filled with roots and earth. The sandbags turned to dust. The radio rusted into silence. But beneath the soil deeper down, the memory of what happened there would hum on and on like a tape stuck in a loop. Waiting, remembering, calling. And sometimes when the static was loudest, when his hands trembled and his chest ached with the weight of things left unsaid, Jackson would answer under his breath. This is Echo 2-5, he would whisper to the empty room. We read you. The hum would grow softer just for a moment. Then the line would go dead. The hill, somewhere far away, would continue its crazy story without him. But he knew deep down that a part of him had never left. A part of him was still there, walking in circles in the dark, caught between years, listening to a voice that sounded a lot like his own, calling for help from a war that never really ended.